What's going on? Welcome to this week's REI Weekly Lesson. This is the third video in my Real Estate Biggest Myths mini-series, and today we're going to talk about myth number 3, which is you should renegotiate every single deal you do if you're an off-market buyer. And I'm going to tell you on this video why that is one of the most heinous things you can do in this business. But before I get into that, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Greg, and I've been a full-time real estate investor now for a decade. I've done almost 450 properties coast to coast, from New York to Seattle to Southern California to Texas. And the goal of this YouTube channel and audio podcast is to share with you what I've learned so you don't have to make those mistakes yourself. So if you get value from this, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching, if you're listening, if you can share the audio with somebody else, that is how we keep growing the show. That's how we keep getting more downloads, subscribers, etc. So let's get started. This is myth number 3 in our series, which is renegotiating every deal to make more money. And I made a similar video and podcast about this maybe about a month or so ago. And I just feel like this is one of the things that I don't know what people teach this. I don't know how people could sleep at night if they teach this, but what ends up happening here, and what I want to explain here, is that people think it's okay to renegotiate a lower purchase price for a property after they already have a buyer and they're already making a profit, and they're just renegotiating to make more money. Now, let me just explain what is renegotiating. Renegotiating is when you get a deal done with a seller and then you renegotiate, which means you change the price, you change the terms, you change the deal up after you already made a deal. Now, in this business, you will have to renegotiate sometimes, but it's not when you already have a buyer in place and a margin. It's usually if the seller in this case, or the buyer, depending on what you're doing, misrepresents something, and then you're doing your due diligence to confirm what they said is true, and you find out what they said was not true. Of course, it's logical to renegotiate. Like, for example, if a seller says their house is in good shape, it doesn't need any work, and you make your offer based on the fact that it's in good shape, and then you go out there and it's in terrible shape, of course you can renegotiate. You said the house is in good shape. It's not. It needs 50 grand worth of work, so I need to be 50 grand lower. So that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In that situation, the seller's the one being shady, lying about the condition in their property. What I'm talking about here is that there are people that teach other people that once you have a deal put together and you're buying a property for a certain number and then you're selling it hopefully for a profit, you just renegotiate anyway when the seller's in a jam so you can make more money. So for example, let's say you have a $25,000 profit and you want to make a $45,000 profit. Instead of selling it to a buyer to pay more money, you go back to the seller when you already have a profit and you renegotiate and say, hey, I actually need to be 20 grand less for this to close. And you put the seller in a bad situation when they're already probably, mentally committed to selling, they're in contract with you, and you hit them over the head with a renegotiation. And that's just pure greed. It's almost a scam, honestly. This is the worst thing you could do in this business, is think about it. If you have a customer that you're buying their house from, which is a huge sale, by the way, it's probably the most money they're ever going to get, most likely, and they're going to get $200,000 net to them after they pay their mortgage off. And they're planning on using that 200 grand for probably the rest of their life because they're most likely an older person. And then you come in and you decide that you want to make more money. So instead of giving them 200, you give them 180, and you basically take 20 grand from them. That is disgusting because you think that you want to make more money, so you're just going to take that from the seller after you already have a deal put in place with a buyer. First of all, it's bad karma, right? That what goes around comes around, and if you're doing that crap intentionally, the chickens are going to come home to roost. Second of all, that's how you get the attorney in general involved in real estate transactions. If they find out that you're somebody who does that, and you have a repeat pattern of doing that, and usually that is, a paper trail if you have addendums and stuff that you sign, you can get yourself in hot water because that's super, super, super shady, and you're taking advantage of somebody in a bad situation, most likely in this business when you have off-market distressed sellers. And it's a pure act of greed, and it's just not a good way to do business. So usually the people who do that are bad at buying houses, which means that they don't know how to get good deals off the bat. So therefore, they try to justify it by paying too much for a house off the bat to quote-unquote win the deal, and then they go sell it for a little bit of a margin. And they just suck at sales, or they suck at negotiating, or they suck at building relationships with owners to really get good discounts. And then they try to make up for it after they have a buyer when the seller's in a pinch. And that is just so shady. If you're good at getting in front of sellers who will sell at a discount, and you're a good negotiator and you can bring a lot of value to the seller in exchange for the lower offer, you never need to do that because the seller's on board to sell you the property cheap. And then a buyer's willing to pay whatever they're willing to pay, which hopefully you can make a lot of money on it. So that is myth number 3. And hey, if you are in the Hudson Valley or Seattle or Delaware and you want to learn how to make big spreads, you could partner with me. Send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or drop me a DM on Instagram @gregor37, and I'll see you on the next REI weekly lesson. Take care.